10 years. 3,652 days. For every single one of those days, I started with the same thought. She is my mission. I was her legs when her own strength failed her. I was her memory when the brain fog rolled in and stole her thoughts. I was the engine that powered our life, working 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to pay the endless bills for her fragile existence. I was a good husband, a loyal soldier on her personal front. And then I opened a single file, and I realized my entire war was a lie. I wasn't a soldier. I was a prisoner. Before that file, before the cold, sharp clarity of the truth, there was the routine. The routine was the architecture of our life, the load-bearing walls that kept everything from collapsing. It started at 4:30 a.m. The alarm on my phone would vibrate, not beep, so as not to disturb Madison. I'd slide out of bed in the dark, my body a symphony of quiet aches from the day before. The floorboards in our small New Jersey house would groan under my weight, and I'd learned which ones to avoid to maintain the silence. Downstairs, the first order of business was coffee. Black, strong. The fuel required to be 2 men in 1 day. While it brewed, I'd lay out her morning medications on a small ceramic tray. 7 pills, each one a tiny, colorful soldier in her decade-long battle against chronic fatigue syndrome. I knew them by name, by dosage, by their potential side effects. Gabapentin for nerve pain, modafinil for wakefulness, though it never seemed to do much. A cocktail of vitamins and experimental supplements that cost more than our weekly groceries. By 5:15 a.m., I'd have her breakfast ready. Oatmeal with berries and a specific protein powder the nutritionist in Manhattan recommended. I'd carry the tray upstairs, crack open her door, and find her exactly as I'd left her. A pale, beautiful shape under the sheets, her breathing shallow. "Maddie," I'd whisper, "time for your meds." Her eyes would flutter open. They were the same brilliant blue eyes I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago, but now they were clouded with a permanent exhaustion. "Ryan," she'd murmur, her voice raspy. "What time is it?" "Early," I'd say, helping her sit up. "Don't you worry, just focus on you." That was my mantra. Just focus on you. I'd help her with the pills, spoon-feed her the first few bites of oatmeal if her hands were too shaky, and make sure she was comfortable before I left for my first job. Job 1 was a construction crew, framing houses out near the shore. It was brutal, physical work. From 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., I was all muscle and sweat, hauling lumber, swinging a hammer, my hands raw and calloused. The guys on the crew were good men. They knew my story. They saw me as some kind of saint. "How's Madison?" they'd ask, their voices tinged with pity. "Still fighting the good fight, man," I'd reply, forcing a tired smile. They'd clap me on the shoulder, tell me I was a hell of a man, and I'd feel a familiar mix of pride and profound isolation. Their wives went out for dinner, planned vacations, complained about PTA meetings. My wife's world was the 4 walls of our bedroom. After the construction shift, I'd race home, shower the sawdust and grime off my body, and check on Madison. I'd make her lunch, maybe read to her for half an hour if she was having a good day, before heading out to Job 2. Job 2 was a security guard shift in a sterile corporate office park from 5 p.m. to midnight. It was the polar opposite of the construction site. Silent, empty, and mind-numbingly boring. I'd walk the echoing halls, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, my thoughts my only company. It was here in the oppressive quiet that the weight of it all truly settled on me. The bills, shatis, the specialists who offered glimmers of hope for thousands of dollars, the life I could have had. Right after my second tour in Afghanistan, I had it all lined up. A letter of acceptance from the NYPD Academy. It was all I'd ever wanted. To continue serving, to have a mission that mattered. I had the training, the discipline, the mindset. Maddie and I had just gotten married. Life was a wide open road. Then she got sick. It started slowly, a persistent fatigue, aches she couldn't explain. Then the first collapse, right in the middle of a grocery store. The doctors were baffled. They ran every test imaginable before landing on the vague, life-altering diagnosis: chronic fatigue syndrome. A prison with no bars. I remember her crying in that sterile doctor's office, clinging to my hand. "A cop's life. It's so dangerous, Ryan," she'd sobbed. "I can't lose you. Not now. I need you." So I made a choice. I deferred my spot at the academy. Then I let it go completely. My mission parameters had changed. My new mission was her. Protecting her, providing for her, fighting for her. It wasn't a sacrifice. It was my duty. The duty of a husband. The duty of a Marine. You don't leave a man or a woman behind. For 10 years, I never questioned it. I put on my armor every morning, my work boots, my tool belt, my security guard uniform, and went to war for her. I believed in the cause. I believed in her fight. I believed in everything. Right up until that night, sitting at the kitchen table with our old laptop, when a single click of a mouse detonated the entire foundation of my life. It was almost 1 a.m. when I finally got home. The silence of our suburban street a stark contrast to the clatter of the construction site and the hum of the office park. My bones ached. My mind was numb with fatigue. Madison was asleep, of course. She'd been asleep since 9 p.m., her body needing immense amounts of rest to even function. Our 11th anniversary was in a month. The thought surfaced through the fog of exhaustion. 11 years, a decade of which had been spent in this trench with her. I wanted to do something to remind us of the people we were before the diagnosis, before our world shrank to the size of a pillbox. That's when the idea hit me. A photo album. A physical, hold-in-your-hands book. Our journey. It felt a little cheesy, but the sentiment was real. I booted up the old laptop on the kitchen table, its fan whirring to life like a tiny dying engine. I logged into our shared cloud account, a digital attic filled with years of photos, documents, and memories. I scrolled back through the years. There we were, young and carefree, hiking in the Poconos. There I was, clean-shaven in my dress blues. Madison on my arm at the Marine Corps ball, her smile so bright it could have lit up the room. The photos became more domestic, then more clinical. Fewer outdoor shots, more pictures of her in bed, managing a weak smile for the camera. The timeline of our life was a visual record of a slow, creeping fade. I needed photos from last year. I remembered she had an iPad with her during her 6-week stay at that experimental treatment center in Colorado. She'd said the doctors wanted her to keep a digital journal. I scrolled to the 2022 folder, and that's when I saw it, a subfolder I had not created. COXP 22 Colorado, experimental 2022. It made sense. I figured it was photos of the facility, maybe some scans of her medical charts. I clicked on it. The first image loaded slowly, line by painful line. It wasn't a sterile hospital room. It was a vast, impossibly blue sky, stretched over a jagged landscape of red rock And there, in the center of the frame, suspended on a rope against the rock face, was Madison. But it wasn't my Madison. My Madison had skin like pale porcelain. This woman was tan, her cheeks flushed with sun and exertion. My Madison's arms were thin, almost frail. This woman's arms were corded with muscle, her fingers expertly gripping the rock. My Madison's smile was a tired, fragile thing. This woman's face was set in a look of intense, joyful concentration, a bead of sweat tracing a path down her temple. She was vibrant. She was powerful. She was alive in a way I hadn't seen her in 10 years. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. It's an old photo. My mind screamed, from before. A mistake. I clicked to the next picture. Madison was at the top of the cliff now, unhooking her harness. Standing next to her was a man. He was tall, lean, with that easy, sun-bleached confidence of someone who spends their life outdoors. His arm was around her waist, and they were both laughing, heads thrown back against the sky. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was a deep, genuine, shared moment of triumph. I clicked again, the two of them in a rustic-looking brewery, pints of beer in hand. Again. Hiking through a forest of aspen trees, their gold leaves like a shower of coins. Again. Him kissing her on the cheek, the sun setting behind them, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. My breath hitched. I went back to the first photo and opened the file information. The rational part of my brain, the part that had been trained to analyze intelligence, to look for patterns, took over. Date created, August 14th, 2022. GPS coordinates, 39, 9, 5 degree N, 105, 2811 W, El Dorado Canyon State Park, Colorado, August 14th. That was a Saturday. I remembered it vividly. I had pulled a double shift, 16 hours on the construction site under a brutal sun, to make the next $5,000 payment to the clinic. Madison had called me that morning, her voice barely a whisper, telling me how weak she was, how the treatments were draining her. But she was being brave. For us. The world didn't spin. Time didn't slow down. Instead, a profound and terrifying calm washed over me, the kind of calm I'd only ever felt once before, in a firefight outside Kandahar when the world dissolved into noise and chaos. My training kicked in. Emotion is a liability. Detach. Assess. Act. I scrolled through the rest of the files. There were over 200 pictures. 200 pieces of evidence documenting her secret life. A life of health, adventure, and infidelity, all funded by my sweat and my sacrifice. My hands moved with a cold, steady precision. I inserted an encrypted USB drive into the port. I created a new folder. I copied every single file. Then I copied the entire cloud directory. Everything. Bank statements we saved, insurance forms, emails. I downloaded a decade of our life, a decade of my servitude. When the transfer was complete, I ejected the drive and slipped it into my pocket. It felt as heavy as a grenade. I went back to the browser, cleared the history, wiped the cache, covered my tracks. I pushed my chair back from the table, the scrape of its legs against the linoleum loud in the sleeping house. I walked to the doorway of our bedroom and stood there watching her. She was lying on her side, the moonlight from the window tracing the curve of her shoulder. She looked peaceful, fragile, a perfect, beautiful lie. The woman in the photos and the woman in my bed were two different people, and I had been married to a ghost. The mission wasn't to save her anymore. The mission had changed. Objective, full reconnaissance. Understand the enemy. Document all assets. And then formulate a plan of engagement. The next morning, the alarm vibrated against my nightstand at 4:30 a.m., just as it always had. I silenced it before the second buzz, my movements fluid and automatic. I slid out of bed. The floorboard still groaned, but today, the sound wasn't just a familiar creak. It was a signal, a reminder of the hollowness of the structure I was standing in. Downstairs, I started the coffee. Black, strong. The routine was the same, but the man performing it was different. Yesterday, I was a caregiver. Today, I was an operative deep in enemy territory. Every action was now calculated. Every word would be a test. I laid out her 7 pills on the ceramic tray. Gabapentin, for a nerve pain she didn't have. Modafinil, for a wakefulness she didn't need. They weren't medicine. They were props. Stage dressing for the longest, most elaborate play I had ever unknowingly been a part of. My hand was steady as I arranged them. At 5:15 a.m., I walked upstairs with her breakfast. The tray felt unnaturally light in my hands. I pushed her door open. "Maddie," I whispered, "time for your meds." Her blue eyes fluttered open, the performance beginning anew. "Ryan," she murmured, her voice a fragile, sleepy thing. "Is it morning already?" "It is," I said, my voice even, betraying nothing. I helped her sit up, the familiar act feeling alien and grotesque. Her skin was warm under my hands. The same skin that had been pressed against another man, as on a mountaintop. "I had such a rough night," she said, leaning against the pillows. "The pain in my joints it felt like fire." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, my voice a perfect mimicry of the concerned husband I had been just hours before. I handed her the pills and the glass of water. "Maybe we should call Dr. Albright today. See if we can adjust the dosage." I was watching for it. A flicker, a hesitation, a sign that she detected the change in me. But there was nothing. She was a master of her craft. She swallowed the pills with a practiced grimace, as if they were a bitter but necessary part of her burden. No, she said, shaking her head weakly. "You know how he is. He'll just want more tests, more money. We can't afford that right now. You're already working so hard." Her eyes filled with what looked like genuine, selfless concern for me. It was breathtaking in its audacity. For the rest of the week, I maintained the protocol. I was the perfect husband. In fact, I was better than perfect. I was more attentive. I listened to her complaints with a newfound focus, not just hearing the words, but analyzing them. I started a journal on a burner phone I bought for cash at a bodega downtown. I documented every symptom she described, every limitation she claimed. "My hands are too weak to hold a book today, Ryan. Can you read to me?" she asked one evening. I read to her for an hour, my voice calm and steady, while my mind cross-referenced her claim with a photo I had seared into my brain, her hand chalked and strong, gripping a razor-thin ledge of rock. "The light from the TV is giving me a migraine," she'd complain. I'd turn it off and sit with her in the near darkness, remembering the brilliant, unfiltered sunlight she was basking in on a Colorado summit. The house, once our sanctuary, had become my observation post. I was gathering intelligence. The inconsistencies were everywhere, small cracks in her facade that I had been blind to for a decade. The way she'd instinctively start to rise from the couch too quickly when the doorbell rang, only to catch herself and sink back down with a pained groan. The way the volume and energy in her voice would spike when she was on the phone with her mother, thinking I was out of earshot, before dropping back to a fragile whisper the moment I entered the room. My digital investigation began in earnest. I used the public library as Wi-Fi, never my home network. The burner phone became my command center. I started with the man in the photos. It didn't take long. A reverse image search of his smiling face led me to an Instagram profile. His name was Ethan Vance. His bio read, life coach, alpinist, founder of Unleashed Potential. His page was a curated shrine to himself, a montage of rock climbing, motivational quotes superimposed over sunsets, and videos of him giving seminars to rapt audiences about breaking your self-imposed limits. He was based in Boulder, Colorado. He was a cliché, a predator hiding in the language of self-help. And there, deep in his followers list, was an account with a generic name and a profile picture of a flower. I clicked on it. It was private. But the bio gave it away. Chasing the Sun, NJCO. It was her. I created a fake profile of my own, a woman in her mid-30s, a yoga enthusiast from Austin, looking to find her truth. I followed a few dozen other self-help gurus, and then I sent a follow request to Ethan and to her ghost account. Ethan accepted within the hour. Madison's account accepted a day later. And just like that, I was in. Her private feed was a revelation. It was the life she was living while I was funding her illness. Pictures of her and Ethan drinking wine at a gallery opening in Denver. A video of her running on a trail, laughing as she dodged a tree branch. Posts about the liberating power of the mountains and the importance of shedding the roles society forces upon you. There were comments between them, dripping with shared intimacy. Ethan, another incredible climb today, wild one. You crushed it. Madison, only with the best guide in the world. Can't wait for the next adventure. Adventure, that's what she called it. While I was patching drywall and walking empty corridors, she was on an adventure. The financial trail was the final, brutal piece of the puzzle. I logged into our joint credit card account. I told her I was checking to make sure my paycheck had cleared. I downloaded 10 years of statements. It was all there, laid out in black and white. The charges to the clinic in Colorado were real, but they weren't for medical treatments. They were for a company called El Dorado Adventure Guides. Ethan Vance, owner. There were other charges during those 6 weeks. Restaurants in Boulder I couldn't afford to look at the menu for. A spa called The Healing Stream. REI, the outdoor goods store, where she'd spent over $1,000 on climbing gear. The lies went back years. Specialist consultations in New York City that corresponded with charges for Broadway shows and 5-star hotels. Physical therapy sessions that matched up with purchases at Saks Fifth Avenue. She hadn't just faked a disease. She had built an entire false reality around it. An intricate, sprawling architecture of deceit. And I hadn't just paid for it. I had carried every brick, mixed every batch of mortar, and nailed every board into place with my own 2 hands. I sat in the silence of the library, the damning evidence glowing on the screen in front of me. The anger I had suppressed for days finally began to surface. It wasn't a hot, explosive rage. It was a cold, quiet burn. The kind of cold that freezes steel and makes it hard and strong. She hadn't just lied to me. She had systematically dismantled me. She'd taken my ambition, my purpose, my future, and locked it away to ensure her own comfort and security. She hadn't been afraid of me getting hurt as a cop. She'd been afraid of me having a life that wasn't entirely centered on her. She hadn't needed a nurse. She'd needed a jailer. And she'd made me volunteer for the job. I closed the laptop. My reconnaissance was largely complete. I knew the enemy. I knew her tactics. I knew her accomplices. Now, it was time to plan the counteroffensive. The next phase required a professional touch. My skills were in direct action, in analyzing terrain and enemy movement. This new battlefield, the world of deceit, surveillance, and legal maneuvering, required a different kind of soldier. I called Mark. We served together in Helmand Province, two grunts in the same platoon who did seen the worst of it and managed to walk away. He did left the Corps and used his GI Bill to get a criminology degree and a PI license. He was sharp, relentless, and the only man on earth I trusted implicitly. We met at a dingy diner off the turnpike, the kind of place where the coffee is burnt and the booths are cracked vinyl. He looked the same. Close-cropped hair, a cynical glint in his eye that the Corps had put there, and life had never managed to remove. "Ryan," he said, sliding into the booth opposite me. "You look like shit." "Good to see you too, Mark," I said, managing a weak smile. "So," he leaned forward, his voice low. "The text said it was about a client. But you're not a middleman, Ryan. This is personal. Spill it." I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Exposing this felt like admitting to the world that I had been the biggest kind of fool. But looking at Mark, his steady gaze, I knew I didn't have to carry this alone anymore. I slid the encrypted USB drive across the table. "Plug this in when you get back to your office. Don't do it on any network connected to your main system. The target is a guy named Ethan Vance out of Boulder, Colorado. The folder is labeled EV Intel. I need everything you can find on him. Financials, past relationships, business dealings, any legal trouble. I want to know what he had for breakfast 3 years ago." Mark picked up the drive, weighed it in his hand. He didn't ask what was on it. He didn't ask who the client was. He just looked at me, his eyes searching my face. "Is this guy a threat to you?" he asked, his voice flat. "He's a threat to my situation," I said carefully. "I'm not looking for a confrontation. I'm looking for leverage. Information is ammunition." He nodded slowly, pocketing the drive. "Got it. Consider it done." He paused, then added, "Whatever this is, brother, watch your six." While Mark dug into Ethan's life, I began my psychological campaign at home. It was subtle, a war of attrition fought with whispers and suggestions. I was planting seeds of doubt, not in my own mind, but in hers. I needed her to feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. One evening, as we were watching TV, a commercial came on for a class action lawsuit against a pharmaceutical company. "It's crazy, isn't it?" I said, as if thinking aloud. "All these companies faking test results, people getting sick from drugs that were supposed to help them. You can't trust anyone." I glanced at her, catching a flicker of unease in her eyes before she masked it. "That's why we have to be so careful," she said, her voice laced with her practiced fragility. A few days later, I left an article open on the laptop on the kitchen table. The headline was stark. "Woman sentenced to 5 years in prison for faking illness to defraud insurance companies." When I came back into the room, she was staring at the screen, her face pale. She slammed the laptop shut the moment she saw me. "Just reading the news," I said casually, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. Scary what people are capable of. She didn't respond. The pressure was working. Her performance, once flawless, began to show cracks. Her symptoms became more dramatic, more frequent. She was overacting, trying to reinforce a reality she sensed was beginning to crumble. Her migraines became blinding. Her fatigue was so profound, she claimed she couldn't lift her head from the pillow for an entire day. She was doubling down, but it was the act of a desperate gambler, not a confident manipulator. Her anxiety manifested as accusations. "You seem distant, Ryan," she'd say, her eyes welling up with crocodile tears. "It's like you're not here with me anymore. Don't you believe how much I'm suffering?" "Of course I do, Maddie," I'd reply, my voice a soft, reassuring lie. I'd take her hand. "I'm just tired. Long hours." Each lie I told felt like sharpening a knife. Each touch was a betrayal. I was becoming as much of a phantom as she was, my true self hidden behind a mask of caring devotion. The toll was immense. I barely slept. The anger inside me was a constant, low-grade fever. But I held the line. The mission required discipline above all else. Mark called a week later. "Meet me at the diner." Midnight. The place was empty except for a lone cook smoking by the back door. Mark slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "Your boy Ethan Vance is a piece of work," he said, taking a sip of coffee. "He's not just a life coach. He's a professional parasite. He preys on unhappy, wealthy women. Sells them this fantasy of an authentic life. Gets them to invest in his wellness retreats, which are basically just glorified climbing trips where he sleeps with them. He's got a string of them going back years. 2 of them threatened to sue him for fraud, but he's slippery. Convinced them it would be too embarrassing to go public. He drains them financially and emotionally, then moves on to the next one." He pushed a single sheet of paper towards me. It was a copy of a bank transfer, a wire of $25,000 from Madison's private trust fund, money her grandmother had left her, to Ethan's company, Unleashed Potential LLC. The transfer was dated 2 weeks ago. "This is the first payment," Mark said, for his new exclusive couples retreat package. "He's graduating from one-on-one sessions to high-end group therapy. Your wife isn't just his lover. She's his seed investor." The final piece clicked into place. The scope of her betrayal was deeper than I could have imagined. She wasn't just cheating. She was stealing from our future, from the money ID worked to protect, and investing it in her affair. Then came the turning point, the inciting incident for my endgame. That night, Madison called me into the bedroom. She was propped up on her pillows, a look of solemn importance on her face. She had a brochure in her hand. The cover showed a soaring mountain peak. The title read, "The Phoenix Program: Rise from the Ashes of Chronic Illness." "Ryan," she began, her voice quivering with manufactured hope, "I've been talking to the clinic. There's a new program. It's groundbreaking, but it's very exclusive and very expensive." She slid the brochure across the covers to me. It was a slick, professionally designed piece of propaganda, filled with pictures of smiling, healthy people and testimonials about miraculous recoveries. The location was a remote lodge in the Colorado Rockies. The founder and lead facilitator was, of course, Ethan Vance. "They have an opening," she said, her eyes pleading. "It's a 2-month immersive program. It starts next month. Ryan, this could be it. This could be the thing that finally gives me my life back. I looked at the dates printed on the brochure. The program started on our 11th wedding anniversary. How much? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She hesitated. It's, a lot. $50,000. But honey, think about what it means for us, for our future. She reached for my hand. I know we don't have it, but you could take on more overtime. We could take out a second mortgage on the house. And there it was, the demand, the final outrageous act of exploitation. She wanted me to work myself into an early grave, to leverage the only real asset we had, to pay for her romantic getaway with her lover, disguised as a miracle cure. A cold clarity washed over me. The time for observation was over. The time for psychological games was over. It was time to set the trap. I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, I let a genuine emotion show on my face. It was a slow, tired smile, a smile of surrender. Okay, I said softly. You're right. Your health is the only thing that matters. I'll figure it out. I'll make it happen. The relief that flooded her face was absolute. She thought she had won. She thought her control was complete. She didn't see the smile for what it was. It was the same calm, quiet expression my guys in the platoon knew all too well. It was the smile that meant the enemy had made a fatal miscalculation. It was the smile that meant someone was about to learn a very, very expensive lesson. My acceptance of her plan unlocked a new level of audacity in her. Believing I was a beaten man, a fully domesticated workhorse tethered to her whims, she dropped all pretense of caution. Her phone calls with Ethan, once conducted in hushed tones, became more frequent and careless. She started leaving her laptop open, so confident was she in my exhaustion and lack of suspicion. I, in turn, became the model of the devoted, desperate husband. I told my foreman I was available for any and all overtime. I picked up extra weekend shifts at the security gig. I came home later, more visibly exhausted, playing my part to perfection. I spoke to our bank about refinancing the house, letting her overhear the conversation, feeding her the narrative she wanted to believe. The loan officer was really positive. I'd tell her, slumping into a kitchen chair. Just a lot of paperwork. But we'll get it done. For you. You're a good man, Ryan, she'd say, her voice dripping with a sympathy that was acid in my veins. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, I'd reply, the double meaning hanging in the air, completely lost on her. The plan began to form in my mind, not as a single explosive event, but as a sequence, a controlled demolition. The goal was not just to expose her, but to dismantle the entire structure of her life. Her support system, her financial security, and her carefully crafted identity as a victim. I wanted to leave her with nothing but the rubble of her own lies. The anniversary dinner would be the main event, the moment the detonator was pushed. But I needed to set the charges first. Charge 1, her parents. Eleanor and David were good people, but they were blinded by their love for their sick daughter. They enabled her, sending her money for treatments, and they viewed me with a mixture of pity and quiet disapproval, as if my inability to earn more was somehow prolonging their daughter's suffering. They needed to see the truth, not be told it. 2 weeks before our anniversary, I called Eleanor. Eleanor, it's Ryan. Listen, I wanted to ask for your help with a surprise for Madison. Her voice warmed immediately. Oh, Ryan, how wonderful. Of course. What do you have in mind? Our anniversary is coming up, I said, my voice carefully modulated to sound earnest and a little overwhelmed. And with this new Phoenix program in Colorado, it feels like a turning point. I want to do something special. I'm taking her to Oriole in the city, her dream restaurant. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Oriole was a symbol of a life they thought was lost to them forever. Ryan, that's incredibly expensive. Can you afford that? I'm making it work, I said, injecting a note of weary determination. She deserves it. But here's the thing. I want you and David to be there, as a surprise, to celebrate this new chapter of hope for her. It would mean the world to her and to me. The hook was set. The idea of witnessing their fragile daughter being feted at one of New York's finest restaurants, on the cusp of a miraculous recovery, was irresistible. We'll be there, Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. Oh, Ryan, you are an absolute saint. I'm just a husband, I replied. The words tasted like ash. Charge 2, the money. I discovered that the $25,000 transfer to Ethan had come from a trust account solely in Madison's name. I had no legal claim to it, but the second payment, the one she was waiting for from our refinanced home, was another story. I went through the motions with the bank, got the pre-approval, and set a closing date for 3 days before our anniversary. Madison was ecstatic. The money will be in our joint account on Friday morning, I told her. I'll wire it to the clinic from there. You handle it, honey, she said, waving a dismissive hand. All those numbers just make my head spin. Of course they did. On Thursday night, the day before the money was set to transfer, I executed my plan. I logged into our online banking portal. I opened a new savings account at a completely different bank, an account only in my name. I set up a wire transfer for the full amount of the loan, $100,000, from our joint account to my new private account, scheduled to execute at 8:00 a.m. the next morning. Then, I changed the password to our joint account. Charge 3, the accomplice. I needed to neutralize Ethan Vance. I didn't want a messy confrontation. I wanted him to simply disappear. Using the information Mark had given me, I drafted an email. It was a masterpiece of cold corporate legalese. I sent it from a new anonymous email address. To Ethan, Vancey Unleashed Potential, from Legal Affairs, Veritas Financial Group subject. Urgent. Cease and desist and demand for repayment. Mr. Vance, this correspondence serves as a formal legal notice. It has come to our attention that you have solicited and received funds under fraudulent pretenses from multiple individuals who are clients of our firm's wealth management division. We have compiled substantial evidence, including bank statements, personal correspondence, and sworn affidavits, detailing a pattern of behavior that constitutes wire fraud, mail fraud, and undue influence. Specifically, we are prepared to move forward with a multi-plaintiff civil suit and to turn over our findings to the Colorado Attorney General's office. The evidence pertaining to your dealings with a Ms. Madison Miller, née Davenport, is particularly damning. However, our clients wish to avoid the publicity of a protracted legal battle. Therefore, we are authorized to make a one-time, non-negotiable offer. You will cease all contact with Ms. Miller immediately. You will dissolve the Phoenix program and any associated ventures, and you will return the full amount of $25,000 to an account we will specify within 48 hours. Should you fail to comply with these terms, We will file our suit on Monday morning. We will also be forwarding our complete file to several investigative journalists with whom we have a working relationship. We are confident they will find the story of a charismatic life coach who preys on vulnerable women to be of significant public interest. We await your prompt compliance. I knew a creature like Ethan. He wasn't a fighter. He was a scavenger. Faced with a real threat, not an emotional ex-lover, but the cold, impersonal menace of a powerful law firm and public humiliation, he would fold. He would cut his losses and run. He would vanish from Madison's life without a trace. The final days were a blur of cold, calculated action. Everything was in place. The guests were invited. The stage was set. The trap was baited. The morning of our anniversary, I woke up before the alarm. I watched her sleep for a long moment, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. There was no anger left, no pain, just a quiet, resolute finality. The mission was about to reach its conclusion. I got dressed in the dark. I put on my best suit, the one I hadn't worn since my father's funeral. I looked at myself in the mirror. The man staring back was leaner, harder than the one who had started this journey. The exhaustion was still there in the lines around my eyes, but beneath it was something new, something that had been dormant for 10 long years, a steel-edged purpose. I walked downstairs. I took the encrypted USB drive from its hiding place. I slipped it into my suit pocket. Then I picked up my phone and sent a single text to Madison's ghost account, the one she thought I knew nothing about. It was a screenshot of the wire transfer confirmation, showing the full $100,000 moving into an account she couldn't access. Beneath it, I wrote a simple message. Happy anniversary. I'd wear your best dress tonight. We're going to have a lot to talk about. The silence that followed my text message was more profound than any argument. It was a digital void, a vacuum where her frantic denials and accusations should have been. I could almost picture her on the other side of it, staring at the screen, the color draining from her face, the gears of her manipulative mind grinding to a halt against a problem she couldn't charm, bully, or guilt her way out of. For the first time in a decade, she had no control. I spent the day methodically. I called the bank and put a stop payment on the cashier's check I'd told Madison I'd be getting for her clinic. I called the construction site and told my foreman I was taking a week of unpaid leave. Then, I called the NYPD recruitment office and asked for the date of the next physical fitness exam. Every action was a snip of the scissors, severing the threads that had bound me to my old life. At 6 p.m. I went upstairs. The bedroom door was closed. I knocked once, a sharp rap of my knuckles. The car is here, Madison. We'll be late. A few moments later, the door opened. She was stunning. She wore a deep emerald green dress, the one ID bought her for our 5th anniversary, a lifetime ago. Her hair was done, her makeup flawless. She had constructed a perfect mask of calm elegance. But her eyes were different. The usual soft, victimized haze was gone. In its place was a hard, brittle sheen, the look of a cornered animal. The money, Ryan, she said, her voice low and tight, devoid of its usual feigned weakness. What did you do? We can talk about it at dinner, I said, my tone polite, almost indifferent. Our guests will be waiting. The drive into Manhattan was silent. The air in the town car was thick with unspoken words. She stared out her window at the passing lights of New Jersey, her jaw clenched. I looked straight ahead, my mind calm, running through the sequence of events one last time. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about a clean, efficient execution of a plan. We arrived at Oriole. The maitre d' led us through the bustling, elegant dining room to a secluded circular booth in the back. And there, waiting for us, were Eleanor and David. They stood up, their faces beaming. "Surprise," Eleanor chirped, rushing forward to hug a visibly rigid Madison. "Oh, darling, you look beautiful." "So strong." "Ryan arranged everything," David said, clapping me on the shoulder with a newfound respect. "What a wonderful anniversary gift. A celebration of new beginnings." Madison shot me a look of pure venom over her mother's shoulder, a look that said, "You will pay for this." I simply gave a small, polite smile in return. We settled into the booth. The waiter poured champagne. The first 20 minutes were a masterclass in social theater. Her parents asked about the Phoenix program, their voices filled with hope. Madison answered in clipped, vague terms, claiming she was overwhelmed by it all. I played the role of the proud, supportive husband, deflecting any detailed questions and steering the conversation toward lighter topics. The appetizers arrived. David raised his glass. "A toast," he said, his eyes misty. "To my daughter Madison, on her incredible journey back to health. And to Ryan, the most dedicated, selfless, and honorable man I know. We are so lucky to have you in our family. To your future." "To your future," Eleanor echoed, her glass clinking against the others. Madison didn't drink. She just stared at me over the rim of her flute. I set my glass down gently. "Thank you, David. That means a lot." I paused, letting the silence hang for a moment. "And since you brought it up, I actually prepared a little anniversary gift for Madison, a sort of visual journey of our own, to celebrate how far we've come." I pulled a sleek new tablet from my suit jacket. I.D. bought it specifically for this moment. I placed it in the center of the table. "I call it our decade of dedication," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the relative quiet of our corner. I tapped the screen. The slideshow began. The first few images were us, young, happy, in love, hiking, laughing, the wedding. I saw Eleanor dab at her eyes with a napkin. Then the tone shifted. A photo of me, covered in grime on the construction site, my face etched with exhaustion. The next, a shot of me asleep in a chair on my security guard shift. My head slumped against a window. ID asked Mark to take those surveillance style, to capture the reality of my life. "This was the price of the fight," I said softly. "The hours, the exhaustion, but it was worth it. Every second. For her health." Madison's breathing was shallow. She knew what was coming. "And then," I said, my voice hardening just a fraction, "came the breakthrough. The experimental treatment in Colorado." I swiped the screen. The image that filled the screen was of Madison, vibrant and alive, halfway up a rock face in El Dorado Canyon. Eleanor gasped. David leaned forward, squinting. "What is this? Is that Maddie?" "Yes," I said. "That's Maddie. This was taken last August, on a day she told me she was too weak to lift a fork." Swipe. Madison and Ethan laughing in the brewery. And this was her intensive hydration therapy. Swipe. Madison and Ethan kissing against a mountain sunset. And this was a meditative healing session. I kept swiping, photo after photo, her radiant health, her shocking vitality, her intimate moments with a man who was not her husband. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. David's face had gone from confused to ashen. Madison finally broke. "He's lying," she hissed, her voice sharp. "He photoshopped those. He's being cruel because he's stressed." "Am I?" I asked calmly. I exited the slideshow and opened a new folder. "Then perhaps you can explain these." On the screen now was a copy of the $25,000 wire transfer from her trust fund to Unleashed Potential, LLC. Then, the detailed report from Mark on Ethan Vance, outlining his history of preying on women. Then, the itemized credit card statements, the five-star hotels, the Broadway shows, the $1,000 shopping spree at REI. Each document was a nail in the coffin of her lie. The table was utterly silent, save for Madison's ragged breathing. Eleanor was openly weeping now, not for her sick daughter, but for the monstrous deception that had been unveiled. David stared at his daughter, his expression one of complete, horrified disillusionment. I turned the tablet to face Madison directly, opening the final file. It was a live feed from a discreet security camera I had paid Mark to install opposite Ethan Vance's condo in Boulder. The feed showed him frantically loading suitcases and climbing gear into the back of his SUV. He was running. My email had worked. "Your business partner seems to be dissolving your assets," I said. "And as of 8 a.m. this morning, your investment capital from our home was moved to a secure location. The Phoenix program is officially bankrupt." I looked from her horrified face to her stunned parents. I spoke to them, but my words were for her. For 10 years, I honored my vow, in sickness and in health. I gave you my youth, my career, my entire life. I thought I was your caregiver, but I wasn't. I was your enabler, your living, breathing excuse to not face the world. And this man, I gestured to Ethan's image on the screen, was your reward for my sacrifice. I stood up, my chair making no sound on the thick carpet. I looked down at Madison. The mask was gone. Her face was a twisted ruin of rage and panic. For the first time, she looked truly weak, truly helpless. I took the house key from my pocket and placed it on the table. Next to it, I placed my wedding ring. It made a small, dull sound against the fine linen. "The bill for dinner is taken care of," I said, my voice flat and final, just like all the others. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked through the elegant restaurant, past the curious glances of other diners, and out into the cool Manhattan night. I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt light. The crushing weight of a decade-long mission, a mission built on a lie, had been lifted. I was free. The war was over. I had been deceived, betrayed, and nearly broken. But in the end, I had won. The aftermath wasn't explosive. It was a slow, quiet collapse. I'd expected frantic calls, tearful voicemails, angry texts from Madison, from her parents. But there was nothing. My final act in that restaurant hadn't been an argument. It had been a verdict. I had presented the evidence, passed the sentence, and walked away from the execution. There was nothing left for them to say. I stayed with Mark for a few days, sleeping on a lumpy couch in his small apartment in Queens. It felt more like a home than the house in New Jersey had in years. The air wasn't thick with deceit. Mark didn't ask questions. He just kept the coffee pot full and left me alone with my thoughts. On the third day, a manila envelope arrived for me. It was from a divorce attorney. Madison had filed, citing irreconcilable differences. Attached was a demand for alimony, half the value of the house, and a portion of my future earnings. It was a desperate, final attempt to maintain her grip, to continue the grift. I took the papers to a lawyer Mark recommended, a bulldog of a man named Sal. I didn't give him a long, emotional story. I just handed him the encrypted USB drive. "This is everything," I said. 10 years of financial records, proof of infidelity, and documented evidence of extensive fraud. She's not getting a penny. In fact, I want my money back. I want the house. I want everything my labor paid for. Sal looked at me over his glasses, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Son," he said, "this isn't a divorce case. This is a demolition." While the lawyers went to war, I focused on my new mission, rebuilding myself. I started running every morning before the sun came up, pounding the pavement through the streets of Queens. The physical pain was a relief, a clean burn that cauterized the deeper wounds. I pushed my body to its limits, reclaiming the strength and discipline the Corps had instilled in me. The same strength and discipline I had poured into a bottomless pit of lies for a decade. I took the NYPD physical exam and passed easily. The written and psychological exams followed. In every interview, when they asked me about the 10-year gap in my resume after the Marines, I gave them the same simple answer. I was dealing with a long-term family health crisis. It required my full attention. The situation is now resolved. It was the truth. The sickness in my family had been a lie, and I had cured it. The news from Sal came in sporadic, satisfying updates. Faced with a mountain of undeniable evidence, Madison's legal strategy crumbled. Her demand for alimony became a joke. When Sal's team filed a countersuit for fraud, demanding repayment for the medical expenses and the money wired to Ethan, she and her family panicked. Her father, David, called me once. His voice was hollow, broken. "Ryan, we're so sorry. We never knew." "I know you didn't, David," I said. And for the first time, I felt a sliver of pity for him. He was a victim too, in his own way. "She needs help, Ryan," he pleaded. "Real help. A psychiatrist. She's not well." "I agree," I said. "But that's not my mission anymore." I wished him luck and hung up the phone. In the end, they settled. I got the house, free and clear. Madison was forced, through a court order, to repay a significant portion of the money she'd funneled to Ethan over the years, forcing her parents to liquidate some of their retirement savings to cover the debt. She wasn't left with nothing, but she was left with the consequences. Her lies had a price, and for the first time in her life, she was being forced to pay it herself. 6 months after that dinner at Oriole, I stood in a crisp new uniform under a pale winter sky. It wasn't my Marine Corps dress blues, but it felt just as significant. The gray shirt and black tie of an NYPD recruit. I was older than most of the others in my class at the academy, and the lines on my face told a different story than their fresh-faced enthusiasm. They saw a future of service and excitement. I saw a second chance, a life I had earned back from the brink. I sold the house in New Jersey. I didn't even go back inside. I hired a company to clear it out, told them to donate everything. It was a museum of a life that was no longer mine, and I had no interest in the exhibits. My new life was a small, clean apartment in Bay Ridge, a place that smelled of fresh paint, not stale sickness. My belongings fit into 2 duffel bags. It was all I needed. One evening, after a grueling day of training, I was scrolling through the news on my phone when a small headline from a Colorado paper caught my eye. "Boulder life coach arrested in fraud scheme." It was Ethan, One of his other victims, emboldened by the rumors of his legal troubles, had decided to press charges after all. The article detailed his method of operation, preying on lonely women, selling them a fantasy. It mentioned an unnamed co-conspirator from New Jersey in a previous settled case. I knew who that was. His picture was a mugshot now, the confident, sun-kissed charm replaced by a cheap, desperate fear. He had been neutralized. I put the phone down. I felt no satisfaction, no joy, just a quiet sense of an account being closed, a loose end being tied off. My life now is measured in different increments. Not in pill schedules and work shifts, but in training modules, legal codes, and the disciplined rhythm of the academy. It's harder than any construction job, more demanding than any security detail. And I have never felt more alive. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the last 10 years. I don't see them as a waste. I see them as my second tour of duty, a different kind of war, fought in a quiet house in the suburbs instead of the deserts of Afghanistan. It was a war against an enemy I didn't see, a war of psychological attrition. It taught me about patience. It taught me about the profound difference between devotion and servitude. And it taught me that the most dangerous cages aren't the ones with bars, but the ones built from love and pity. 10 years ago, I put aside my own mission for someone else's. I thought I was being a hero, a savior, but I was just a prisoner, guarding my own cell. Now the door is open. I'm standing under the vast, open sky of a future I chose for myself, and my mission is finally, completely my own.